We're back. This is the Nomads section. Garrett, Charles, McKenna, and Alistair. We're almost done. We got this one and then the Amazons left. So, I'm not going to be wasting any time jawing at you. And just jump right in. This is Garrett. He's our first dude we're going to take on. I gotta say, with the advent of the movie, I really hate Garrett. I couldn't help it. I'm not gonna lie. The movie it kind of bled over into the book canon for me. Even though movie canon and book canon, I consider the two pretty separate. But they somehow managed to make him really awful in the movies. But I'm gonna put that out of my mind and just do the profile. Okay, his name is Garrett, date of birth mid-1700s, and his date of transformation around 1780. We have no clue who turned him. He's from New England. He has blonde hair. He's 6'2". He's tall and lanky. He's tall and lanky. He wears his sandy-colored hair tied back with a leather thong. Okay, how is that exactly indicative of any personality? What was the point of that description? It's like she had to throw it in because she said it in Breaking Dawn. I don't really care how he wears his hair. You don't really spend your time talking about how anyone else wears their hair. You mention their hair color and if it's wild or long, but you don't ever mention... And Rosalie prefers to have it tied up in a bun, and Alice likes to spike hers with gel. What? Why did you put that in there? And he's recently joined the Denali Coven with Carmen, Eleazar, Katrina, and Tanya, and Kate is his mate. Yeah, we get into why that's stupid in the actual recap. Alright, personal history. Garrett was transformed during the American Revolutionary War, a hot-headed patriot who willingly fought for the colony's right to self-govern. He was a true believer in the American dream. You know, the Revolutionary War wasn't one of those controversial wars where a lot of people didn't want to go to fight or anything like that. I know there were people in the colonies who didn't want to rebel against British rule, but a huge majority did. So mentioning that kind of seems like, oh, he was just one of these exemplary Revolutionary War soldiers who really fought because he believed in it. Yeah, a lot of them did. Okay. His transformation occurred by accident in the aftermath of a battle. Local vampires took advantage of the war's massive death toll to feast frequently. Garrett was with an isolated group of 10 soldiers when a vampire attacked them, knocking Garrett unconscious at the beginning of the attack. The vampire drained the other 9 soldiers. 9? Holy God! 9? How? That's 72 pints of blood! How in the hell did a vampire drink that much blood in one sitting? Do you know how many gallons that is? That's 9 gallons of blood in one sitting. How? You can't... How? Where does the blood go? How? I'm still stuck on this. How? 9 people in one sitting. Sorry, not 9. Yeah, 9 people in one sitting. That's 9 gallons. How? I'm sorry, I'm kind of stunned. I knew about it, but I'm moving on. Because I've talked about how stupid it is, how much blood they drink. So, just moving on. How? Not to mention, Bella didn't even drink that much as a newborn vampire on her first day. The newborn vampires never drink that much. And yet this guy's not a newborn vampire. He attacks them and says, I'm going to eat all 10 of these people. I'm sorry, that just kind of locked me up. Alright. At the time he came to Garrett, he was so sated he didn't drink much of Garrett's blood. Yeah, I should hope he should be sated after 9 gallons. Given the blow to Garrett's head, the vampire didn't expect the soldier to survive. Creating another vampire was not his intent. Again, it seems awfully careless on the part of these vampires, who have specific instructions not to let themselves be seen by humans or discovered. And yet they just don't really check and make sure that that the humans they're attacking are dead before they leave. And the implication here is that a lot of vampires are created during times of war, which, again, that doesn't seem like a good thing. So you think the Volturi would get wind of a newborn vampire causing trouble. They go find it. They take care of it. They catch the one who changed its scent. Dimitri finds him. And they get in trouble. You'd think they'd be more careful. Unless, of course, there's absolutely no threat because the Volturi are completely ineffectual leaders. There's also that idea. After the transformation was complete, Garrett's quest to understand what had happened to him turned into a permanent characteristic. He's always curious and willing to investigate a mystery. I'm sorry, I'm just having real trouble with this. His quest to understand what had happened to him turned into a permanent characteristic. It's not hard to figure out what happened to you. And I love, again, Meyer just blows over the idea that anyone would wrestle with the concept of now you have to kill and eat people. I mean, this could have been a tragic story. He could have gone back to his company to try and figure out, what was going on, found a friend of his and newborn frenzy, killed and ate him. And you'd think he'd be horrified with that, but no. Instead, he's still the American revolutionary good old boy who's just so curious and always up to discover a mystery. Why doesn't anybody wrestle with what has happened to them? Why doesn't anybody react with horror when they find out they have to kill people? Why are they all so fine with this? He's just, boy, I want to find out what happened to me. I'm going to ponder it while I suck the juice out of this guy. And that was not an innuendo. So, yeah, it makes no sense. Why does nobody wrestle with it? And, of course, his famous quotes, they're all have to emphasize, of course, the Cullens. Here's to freedom from oppression, from chapter 34, because he's from the Revolutionary War. We all got that? Well, I hate to tell you this, Garrett, but we won the war. You can, stop doing that now. I like freedom, and I can sometimes be nationalistic myself, but, there comes a point when it gets real annoying, and you've reached that point. It's time to move on into this century now. I have witnessed the bonds within this family. I say family and not coven. Yeah, that's kind of ruined by this guide, which says the Volturi members love each other as they would family. And plus, a lot of the Volturi members actually are related. You wish me to call you master too, like your sycophantic guard. No, we just want you to shut up. I know it's spoiler from the future, but I do love that scene in chapter 37 when Garrett's standing on his soapbox and ranting and raving and sounding like a real moron the whole time. And Ara just sits there and smiles at him and lets him finish his tantrum. It makes me laugh because I'm supposed to think of Ara as evil during that whole scene, but really it's not. He's treating the situation with a great deal of diplomacy. Just let it out, because that's exactly what he did with Edward when he was having his tantrum in the tower in New Moon. Edward was having a tantrum and throwing a fit and trying to attack his guard, and all of them just sat there and, yeah, he'll finish in a second. It's great. I love it. I love villains who just have no regard for someone screaming at him. And it shows that it's a good demonstration of their confidence in their own abilities, because they don't care. Your words are just bouncing off of them, so why don't you just shut up? And finally, if we live through this, I'll follow you anywhere. Well, then that's regards to Kate, because it didn't take long for them to fall in love, and by that I mean it took a couple of days and Kate electrocuting him. Boom, they're in love. We discussed that in the recap, and that's it for him. Because most of his personality didn't leak through until Breaking Dawn, and Garrett's an a-hole. He really is. And like I said, for the first time ever, the movie's bled over into my perception of his character, and I just gotta distance myself from that, because Garrett in the movie was horrible. He was awful. And it's such a shame, because, it's Thranduil and his caterpillars. In fact, before we go, Garrett, screw you. You are Thranduil on your moose. Much better. Alright, we're done with him, and now we're gonna go to the nobodies of... So, wait a second. I said we're doing Charles and McKenna. No, we're not. I'm not doing Charles and McKenna. No. You don't see them until the very end. Whoops. Ignore what I said. We're doing Mary and Randall. That's who we're doing. And this will take me about a minute, because they have no profile. They're just under other nomads. Mary, a solitary nomad. Mary was born in Nova Scotia around 1890 and transformed just after her 28th birthday in 1918, and that's it. Randall was born in California in 1945 and became a vampire in 1963 at age 16. Carlisle was one of the first vampires he met, and he's always considered him a great friend. And that's it. Okay, goodbye, Marion Randall. We're done with you. All right, now we get to move on to Alistair. No, not that one. This one. Alright, I'm going to preface this by saying that Meyer dumps a whole lot of history in his profile and is trying to tie it up with human history. And the reason I say that is because, again, I didn't go back to confirm all of these facts. I'm going to focus on a different issue when it comes to this. But I'm sure she got a whole lot of it wrong. But, yeah, you all can focus on the history fails. That wasn't my main focus this time around. My focus here is the fact that this simply doesn't work, even if she had gotten the history completely correct. So, time for Alistair. Alright, date of birth, 1300, and date of transformation around 1320 at approximately 20. Take out around and approximately, and you're fine. That's the one that bugs me the most. Again, I know I harp on about this every time. But date of birth around 1300, date of transformation around 1320 at approximately 20. It's not about, it is. Alright, source of transformation, I'm going to save that. Place of origin, he's from England, he's got black hair, he's 6'2", he's tall and slender. Oh, does he carry 8 pages? And he can track both people and things. Wow, that's pretty powerful. He can sense the general direction of whatever he's looking for, but it takes him a long time to narrow this feeling down to a specific location. If whatever he's seeking is on the move, he may never catch up. That's a pretty good tracking ability. He doesn't need scent. He just feels it. And he doesn't have to track people. He can track objects. That's a good tracking ability. If it were more powerful, I'd say he's the number one, not James. Alright, and he prefers to wander alone. Alrighty, here we go. Alistair grew up in England during the turbulent reign of Edward II, considered the weakest of the Plantagenet kings. Alistair's father was one of the barons who continually fought against Edward's attempts to limit the power of the British peerage. Throughout Alistair's youth, his father and older brother were embroiled in conspiracy after conspiracy as they tried to protect the rights of the aristocracy while also trying to gain a place of preeminence over the other barons. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not that's true or not, or if it's not, or if it's history fail, because that's not the point. The point here is she's trying to shove this guy into already established and well-documented history. He's not there. And we know he's not there. She's literally rewriting history and expecting us to buy it. And considering the stuff that's going on, I think we would have heard about this guy. But we don't. He's not anywhere in history. You can't just rewrite it and shove things in. You can't do that with Quileute legend and mythology, which she did, and now she's doing it with actual history. No, that's not how it works. That's all I'm going to say on that. Alright, Alistair lived quietly at the family's country estate with his mother and sisters. He had no interest in his father's schemes. Why? Why did he not get any interest in it? It's because he's the second son? I'm going to assume it's that. She doesn't specify that that's why it is, which that would make sense. The second son, father didn't have much interest in him, so he was more close to his mothers and sisters who weren't involved in that, so he never got involved with it. It makes sense, but she doesn't say it, so I'm pretty much making it up. Okay, he had no interest. Alistair loved to hunt for sport and was considered the best hunter in the country. Well, this is familiar. Stop writing the same thing, Meyer. He was also an avid falconer. He kept many falcons and trained them. Training them was his favorite pursuit. He loved his birds and spent more time with them than with people.
What kind of a marriage is this?
What kind, indeed? You pay more attention to Thor than you do to me.
Wonder why? He served me far better than you.
But he is dead.
Unknown to Alistair, his father formed an alliance with 2 other barons after the banishment of the king's favorite counselor. Their object was to get Alistair's older brother placed in that vacated position and thereby control the weak king. See? See what I mean? I think we would have heard of this guy, but he's just some baron, Alistair's father. Well, there is no Alistair's father in history in Edward II's reign. Some of the other barons had the same idea, but with their own champions, after multiple betrayals on all sides, Alistair's brother was implicated in a plot to overthrow the king, and he and a few others were executed for treason. The charges were mostly false, created by another powerful aristocrat with an agenda that differed from Alistair's father. You know, the way she's tying this up, I mean, geez, this sounds as wacky as the French Revolution. Losing his precious heir pushed Alistair's father over the edge. The Baron's anger against the king became deeply personal and slightly deranged. He began plotting to actually do what his son had been executed for. He felt he could no longer trust his old allies. He began to explore ever darker sources of aid, becoming deeply involved with the occult. Again, I think we would have heard of this guy. Alistair knew nothing about his father's designs. Of course, he knew his brother's execution. His mother and his sisters grieved privately and withdrew from society entirely. The mark of treason on the family was a hard blow for his sisters, who would have more difficulty making good matches. Alistair, who had never particularly wanted to inherit, was resigned to his duty and planned to care for his sisters if they wished to remain unmarried. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. I admire the resolve and the fact that this guy seems to care for his family, but there would be none of this, well, if you want to remain unmarried, we'll go. No, the thing would be if you couldn't find a match, not if you wanted to. That's not how it worked back then, Meyer. Then, late one night, Alistair's father came for him. Alistair obediently went with his father, though he was not allowed to bid his mother farewell, and he had no idea why he was needed. Told him nothing till they arrived in London. Led him through secret tunnels under the city. Maybe it's through the sewers. And exchanging cryptic signs with masked men along the way. They reached the council room. Around a large round table were many minor aristocrats, some of whom Alistair knew. His father outranked them all and was clearly in charge. Well, clearly. Sat Alistair at the head of the table and bolted the door and explained his plan. His father's gone completely bat stuff. He created a plan to set Alistair on the throne of England. And we have no idea who this guy is. We still don't have this guy's name. He swore Alistair would be the next Charlemagne. Again, you can't just shove this into history and expect no one to know about it. He tried to leave but was restrained. He ranted that he sold his soul and paid an unthinkable price to make Alistair invincible. He tried to reason with his father to no avail, but they believe the Baron's. Everyone else believes the Baron. Who is the Baron? Gilgamesh Wulfenbach's father? I mean, who is this guy? Then there was a quiet knock on the barred door, and everyone blanched. Some clutched at crosses. She's writing a story again instead of a profile. A man entirely enveloped in a dark red hooded cloak glided silently into the room. Everyone bowed to him, and he was greeted as Astaroth by the Baron. Quietly, Astaroth asked for the room to be emptied. Astaroth thanked the Baron for his offering. Everybody left, and they left Alistair alone with the hooded man. Okay, we know he's a vampire. And normally, I would actually give Meyer props for this. Because if he's going by Astaroth, and everyone clearly thinks he's a demon, Astaroth, the demon, in some lore, is known to tempt men through laziness and vanity and that kind of thing. And that's exactly what he did here with Alistair's father. I would give Meyer props for that. But I'm so not. Because I'm pretty sure she just said, oh, Astaroth. That's a famous demon name. We'll go with that one. Why not, Azazel? He's real good at what he does. Ooh, or better yet, why didn't we pick Abaddon? She's sexy, and I have a crush on her. We could have gone with her. But no, we've got Astaroth. And now we have the funniest line in this whole book. Probably in the whole series. Everyone I've shared this with cracks up laughing. It's because it's funny. Now, we just had this huge dramatic scene. The quiet knock on the barred door. Every man in the room, including the Baron, blanched. Some clutched at crosses. One man scurried to throw the door open. He's in a dark red hooded cloak. It's Vincent Price in the Mask of the Red Death. I mean, we have ramped up the drama here, right? We all know something bad's about to happen. You don't follow that up with this line. Astaroth, whose name was actually George, threw off his cloak. I'm going to read that again. Astaroth, whose name was actually George, threw off his cloak. And the tension dies. It's gone. The tension's gone. You tried to ramp up and build this story, and now it's all gone. You don't throw in whose name was actually George. You can introduce it later. You can mention he's really George later, but you don't mention it there. You don't just randomly say Astaroth, whose name was actually George, threw off it. You don't say that. Because it's just funny. Because it's hilarious. And it gets even worse because then we follow up. He was surprised to see a very handsome man who had long blonde curls and wore modern clothes. Oh my god! It's Gilderoy Lockhart under there! The story's dead now. It's deader than disco. Because I'm too busy laughing at George. I'm too busy laughing at whose name was actually George. That's tension killing 101, folks. There you go. I'm going to try and move forward now. And not concentrate on George. Because I'll just wind up laughing. And I don't want to do that because we're actually approaching a halfway decent part of this story. Even though it's been destroyed by George. So, George is laughing and told Alistair his father was crazy, but Alistair could be king if he wanted, and he was going to give him the power to stand against any man, even an army. And he could do whatever he wanted with the power, but might think of honoring his father's wishes, as his father had indeed paid a great price to buy this honor for his son. Georgie Wargie? Or would you prefer, Lord Batfang? Yeah, I swear the only way George here could get better if he said he was from the Isle of Naboombo. I mean, oh my god. Okay. To the serious part. George, you are setting yourself up for some serious trouble. You're going around telling your dad sold his soul, and you can set yourself up as the king, and you can fight against armies and do anything with that power. What if Alistair took you up on that? What if he did decide to take over the king? You now have a vampire killing the King of England and putting himself on the throne. Guess who's gonna hear about that? The Volturi are. And Aro's gonna touch him and find out who told him he could do this. And who set it all up. Guess who's really in trouble now? No more Georgie Wargie. So, on top of being laughably bad, he's also real dumb. He can't get any funnier. He keeps calling him Astaroth George / George. Stop it. Just call him Astaroth. It's not as silly. Alright. He enjoyed entertaining himself with humans. He just had a darker idea of fun. He led on humans in love with the occult, asking them to sacrifice everything they held most dear in exchange for his supernatural assistance. He liked to see how far humans would go to get what they wanted. Of course, he could always have taken their sacrifices without their consent, but he liked to watch them struggle with the dilemma. He pretended to be one of the princes of hell because it impressed the mortals. George is a great guy. Wow, I just love George. It's a good thing he's a bad guy. I mean, he is supposed to be a bad guy, but the only problem here is that's really bad. And it's really, really making Alistair look sympathetic because this is the guy that turned him. He was completely innocent in this. It was his dad that did it. And he was totally innocent. And yet he's one of the bad good guys in Breaking Dawn. We're supposed to look down on him. He's a coward. He's just a horrible little sniveling weasel. We don't like him. But this is his backstory. As dumb as George is, he got involved with this guy. Who, he's not pretending to be a demon at all. He's pretty much acting just like one. Yeah, I ain't got any words. And then, even better, he gives Alistair a few pointers. Stay out of the sun. Don't attract too much attention. Like trying to overthrow the King of England and going up against armies and putting himself on the throne? Is that part of it? He had no idea what he was talking about, and then George bit him, wished him luck, and was gone. And when he was complete, Meyer actually writes something horrifying for once. He found himself surrounded by a large group of terrified peasants bound together with manacles. Unable to restrain himself, Alistair slaughtered most of them. When he was totally sated, there were still a few left living. It was then that his father entered the bloody council room. Astaroth had given him advice on how to stay alive when dealing with his indestructible son. Yeah, that's horrifying. And for once, a vampire is appalled by what happened. The Baron was prepared for Alistair's thirst, but not for his anger. He tried to explain the next steps to Alistair, but Alistair was furious with him, horrified by what he'd just been through, followed by the murders he'd committed. He shoved his father out of the way, accidentally killing him. Yeah, he was horrified by what he'd done. And then he escapes very easily because he's got all these new superpowers, and he wasn't able to ride a horse. He found his father's and tried to mount it, but the poor beast broke its own neck trying to escape him. But once he tried running, he found that horses were unnecessary. He raced home to find his house empty, his mothers and sisters vanished. In a burst of insight, Alistair realized what his father's offering to Astaroth must have been. So now his whole family's dead. He was very close to his mothers and sisters, obviously, and was going to take care of them, and his dad gave them to a vampire in order to get him turned. Totally devastated, Alistair sought refuge with his falcons, only to find that they could bear his presence no more than the horse could. All of his joys in life, which were all human, are now gone. That's actually a tragic backstory. And he hates it. He's obviously very unhappy. He hates what has happened to him. He was horrified by the murders he committed. Granted, he keeps doing them, but the point is, he didn't just immediately, oh, well. And he obviously regrets what's happened to him. He left civilization that night. He avoided all contact with humans. He mistrusted everyone from that point on, assumed conspiracies existed everywhere, and was paranoid about authority figures. Lasting consequences. They happened with this guy. His backstory is actually semi-sad. It's full of holes, and it's got, George, but it actually, with a touching up, is actually tragic. And we feel sorry for this guy. And yet all through Breaking Dawn, Meyer did nothing but slather on the abuse on him. Oh, he ran, and nobody likes him, and he hides in the attic, and he's just pitiful and pathetic, and we don't like him. Did you do this on purpose? Were you trying to make us see, we now feel bad for thinking that about him? Well, you didn't feel bad making us think that about him at the time. This isn't like what was done with Bella Talbot in Supernatural, where she's this horrible antagonist and a borderline scrappy because she always wins, but then in the last episode of season 3, we find out exactly what her backstory is, and within 2 minutes we all are really feeling bad about all the stuff we thought about her. Now she has her own huge following. But Meyer doesn't do that. She doesn't do that at all. She's black and white about things. When you're not supposed to like someone, she doesn't want you to like them. So I'm not sure where she came up with this backstory. And why she assumed we'd still all think Alistair is a twit in the books after this. Because now, he seems sympathetic and perfectly reasonable in not wanting to join up with this. And the Cullens are even worse for cornering him and trapping him into it and not telling him anything about what's going on until he's actually involved. Because that sounds familiar, doesn't it? I think he would have ditched way earlier. Right, he met Carlisle in the 17th century. Carlisle had already discovered a way to exist without the traditional vampire diet, but had not yet gone to Italy or met the Volturi. He was a total recluse at that point and had no interest in conversation. Carlisle was lonely, though, and so enthusiastic about finding someone to talk to that eventually he got Alistair to respond a little before he left. Carlisle was concerned about Alistair's isolated life. Every few decades he would visit to see how Alistair was doing. Against Alistair's wishes, they ended up as friends of sort. Well, now we know where Edward gets it. Leave him alone, Carlisle! And also begs the question of, in Chapter 32, spoilers, the reason Alistair's there is because Carlisle had to call in favors. Well, now this even begs the question, what favors? What does Alistair owe him? Carlisle apparently stalked him. He wants to be left alone, and he's happy that way. Leave him alone. And this quote is, I can't believe I got myself sucked into this mess. What a fine way to treat your friends. I agree. I just pointed that out. But that's the end of it. Those are the Nomads. Sorry about the Charles McKenna thing. I don't know what I was thinking there. But, they're later. They're not important. Alistair's is the only profile that I actually semi-liked. It's full of holes, and the history fail, of course, is thick, and George. But he is vaguely likable and sympathetic when you read that. I mean, everything stripped him in one night, and really emphasizes that it's Meyer did what she didn't intend to do is she really showed that her vampires are horrible. Because there's this vampire going around doing that. And nobody stops him. He's going around ruining lives just because he can. because he thinks it's fun. And he just is brushed off so easily. Meyer did not emphasize this guy. I don't think she even realized what she'd written, honestly. Because when she tries to make an evil villain, we wind up with Aro and the Volturi. But then she just carelessly writes in George. And you have to wonder where he came from. Because that's awful. That's really, really awful. And that's how Alistair came to be. And he's the only vampire I can tell that regrets what he is, doesn't seem to see a way out of it, so he's living with it as best he can. All of his interests in human life are gone and taken from him. He loved animals, and now they can't stand to be around him. His mother and his sisters are all dead at the hands of the same vampire who turned him. Authority figures now freak him out, so he can't fit into the vampire world at all. He's paranoid, and he's going to be like that for the rest of his eternal life. You feel sorry for this guy. Of course, again, I know for a fact Meyer did not intend for us to feel that sorry for him, because we're not supposed to like him. He's a jerk in Breaking Dawn. He ran away. We don't like him. Well, too bad. I kind of like him now. It helps that he's actually not bad to look at in the movie either. We have one group left, and then I'm back on track with my recaps, which is a good thing. It's a real good thing I've saved the next group for last, because I don't even know where to start with them. I'll see you next time for the Amazons.